Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Kurt Leavins. Welcome, Kurt.
Hello, David. How are you this evening?
Good, Kurt. A little shaken by the already technical difficulties that we've had. Hopefully they will end.
What technical difficulties?
Yeah. Oh, man. All right, Kurt, we were planning this, we've been doing Tuesday night podcasts for a little while now, just kind of through the summer as a regular thing. And we planned one again, but it turned out there's a whole boatload of news today.
Busy day.
So we'll get into the Connor McDavid situation and the NHL salary cap, kind of the two biggest items later in the podcast. But we'll just start out really quick by going over, we're running through the prospect series. And I actually think we've reached another area of the prospects. And these are prospects I'm actually really kind of excited about. The last two guys I just wrote about, or I found to be really interesting prospects. And you're writing about Beau Akley. I wrote about Atro Leppanen. And what's his first name? Jonsson, the goalie.
Jonsson, the goalie?
Yes, we'll just call him Jonsson, the goalie.
Jonsson, the goalie.
Samuel Jonsson, I think it is. Samuel
I think
Jonsson.
That's right, yeah. Great
6
big
foot
goalie.
5, 6 foot, big. Why don't we start with him? Then we'll go to Akley. And so what I noticed when I looked at the Oilers' record of drafting and developing goalies in recent years, since essentially this century, is like most NHL teams, actually, they just have a real proclivity to go with big guys. And in his draft year, Jonsson was actually, there was all kinds of players in his same league. Alan Mitchell wrote about this. Low Tide wrote about this. There was all these players in his same league who had much higher save percentages than the 17-year-old Jonsson, other 17-year-olds. But the Oilers drafted him because he's 6'5", and the other guys were like 5'10" and 5'11". And so NHL teams want big goalies. That doesn't stop the Oilers from drafting a whole raft of goalies who are about 6 feet tall. But it turns out when it actually gets down to competition at the AHL level, they are going to go, and I don't know if this is, just because the bigger guys start playing better, but they go with the big guys. So they've gone with guys like Jeff Drouin-Delorier, who was 6'4", drafted in 2002. They drafted Devin Dubnyk in 2004. They both with high draft picks. And they invested a lot of time and effort in developing those guys. The irony is that Devin Dubnyk had a run of 9 really good to great NHL seasons, except for 1 year in there. And it was in that 1 year, one down year, that the Oilers decided to move him out of town. And every other year in that entire run, he was really good. So that was the big mistake.
If you're asking the question.
Was that McT?
It was.
Yeah,
he'll wear that for the rest of his life, I think.
Yeah. So then they moved on from more big goalies, Laurent Brossoit, 6'3", Stuart Skinner, 6'4". And in that time, again, there's been goalies like who have been really highly rated as prospects, like Tyler Bunz, at least, Oiler prospects highly rated. Tyler Bunz, Olivier Waugh, Eetu Laurikainen, Ilya Konovalov, and Olivier Rodrigue. These guys all had the misfortune of being 3 inches too short to really win the hearts of Oilers management and really get any kind of shot at the NHL, significant shot at the NHL level. Could you argue if they earned it or not? I don't know. Maybe. Dubnyk certainly earned his shot, and so actually did JDD. He had a really good season in the AHL before he was called up. Skinner had 2 good years in the AHL before he was called up. So the bigger guys, maybe maybe they got it right. And as the bigger guys grow into their bodies, they get better. And this looks like what's happened with Jonsson, who was drafted in the 5th round in 2022 and wasn't much of a prospect then, but essentially exploded last year in the Swedish 2nd division, the Allsvenskan, I believe it's called, and was voted the goalie of the year. He's 21 now, and he's signed to play in the AHL. 6'5", and initially there was complaints that he didn't move very well. Well, the latest talk about him from scouts is that he moves pretty well. He's getting it down. So it's it's very hopeful. This is he's the highest rated goalie. The second highest is 6'4" Nathaniel Day, and then there's a shorter player, Emil Vinny, who was actually the highest pick of all those three players, and you wrote about him.
And a pretty interesting goalie. He just ran into some injury troubles. So
he's about 6'2" though, isn't he? He's not. So he's kind of a tweener.
Yeah, he's not tiny by any stretch. No.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll Jonsson, I think he's in Bakersfield. I think who did they sign? Matt Tompkins, a veteran goalie. Yep. It'd be nice to see Samuel Jonsson go in there and win the starting job, or significant playing time in his first year, 30 games at least, and see what he can do in that first North American season, because we're short on goalies. Some people think it's a big crisis for the Oilers. Others aren't so sure. He's not the answer this year, but goalies announce their talent as fast as anyone, and he could be ready soon. He is an exciting prospect.
The interesting thing to watch, of course, will be there's a big difference between playing goal in that Finnish league and playing goal in the AHL. So we'll see how big of a jump it is, because if it takes him that much time again to adjust to the North American game, it could just be another retread we're looking at. However, if he comes over and, like as you suggest, he catches fire right away and starts, taking time away from the more established veteran, that'll be a really good sign. Goalies are voodoo. It's hard to say. I like his size, but everything I've read about him is he's had difficulty moving post to post and tracking the puck behind the net. Right. So we'll see if he can do that successfully at a North American pro level.
Yeah, that was the book on him when he was drafted, right? And that's kind of stuck with him. So Scott Wheeler said otherwise, the Athletic prospect writer, more recently when he wrote about him in December, he was more willing. He was giving him credit for moving pretty well. He was drafted by the old regime, by Tyler Wright. And at the time when they drafted him, Tyler Wright said he was one of our targets and we lucked out getting him where we got him. So they were, it's actually a fairly standard thing to say, but from head scouts, but they were really excited by him. And it's interesting, like this group did offer him a contract, this player drafted in the 5th round by another group. So kind of a no-brainer though, when he did win the goalie of the year in the Swedish second division. So that would be, I think it might be a cut above the ECHL, the Swedish second division, but maybe not. It might be kind of the equivalent, with the AHL being above both of those two leagues.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, I think it would be a cut above the ECHL because it would have all kinds of, definitely it would be.
Yeah, but a cut below the AHL.
But a cut below the AHL, kind of in between those two leagues. Beau Akley.
Yeah. This is a prospect that I got the sense in talking with you that maybe I'm a little more up on him than you are. And I think in some ways, I think Beau Akley has suffered in terms of how people see them as a prospect through no real fault of his own. 14 games into the previous season, he had a mid-ice collision, ripped up his shoulder, and missed the rest of the year. And I mean, that isn't good for a prospect. He was in prime development time, and it's difficult to get that development time back. The good news was after a couple of months last season at the start where he was kind of getting his conditioning back and kind of getting into the flow of things, he really picked it up and really had a good rest of his year. Barry's playoff run didn't go the way they hoped that it would. And he maybe wasn't as productive in the playoffs as they hoped he would be. But I still think that he is an excellent prospect. He moves very well, moves the puck very well, has great offensive instincts. The interesting thing this past year, because Barry had a couple guys back there who could move the puck, they didn't rely solely on Beau Akley to move the puck and run the power play. As a result, a very valuable thing happen. He got a chance to focus on his two-way game. And the people who saw him say he's a way better two-way defenseman than he was, at any time before in his junior career. He's going to be in the AHL this year. And if they're doing things right in Bakersfield, they're going to give this guy lots of minutes and see what he can do. The new head of the new head of scouting has said, he should have a good year in Bakersfield. He's going to get a shot to have a good year in Bakersfield. The real key about Beau Akley is his handedness. He shoots right.
Yeah.
This player type with a left shot and 6 feet tall might not be exceptional, but this guy with that right shot, that's just a different pickle, right? I like the player. Obviously got the 5 games in at World Juniors last year, and I think that international experience is going to be really important and will have helped made up for some of that lost development time that he had. I'm positive he will spend the whole year in Bakersfield, but I think he would have a shot to play NHL games next season, provided his development year goes well.
I didn't know that he had picked it up as the year went on. I just saw that his scoring stats had gone down year to year, which is not a good sign with any prospect in major junior. You expect them to get better and better, and sometimes quite a bit better as they become 19 years old on the team. One of the oldest players playing against sometimes 16 and 17-year-olds. So that didn't happen. And another defenseman, Jonsson Atro, I think his name is, came in, and he was a high draft pick this year, 17-year-old, and he kind of took over, I think, on the power play. So that cut into Akley's time there. The guy I'm writing about, so Akley ranked 6 or tied for 7th?
7.
Tied for 7th with Jonsson. The guy I'm writing about, Atro Leppanen, is very similar. He's left shot, same size, offensive puck moving defenseman. And when his name first came up and we were talking about him as recently as last week, I think I said, have any players like this ever made it into the NHL? So that is the question I set out to answer in writing about him. And I was actually kind of surprised by and encouraged by what I found. So in this century, when you're looking at defensemen who are 25 or over, they've played their pro careers in Europe, and they're coming over to the NHL at this later age. How many of them make it? And I off the top of my head, I couldn't think of any. And I was wondering, are there any? Is this just a waste of time? Because the Oilers have gone through a number of players like this who haven't stuck, like Johan Ovitu, Anton Belov, a bigger player who actually played in Edmonton but never stuck here.
I remember Anton Belov.
Who are some of the other ones? There's a couple more. And I just thought, is this another one of these guys that just the Oilers just never get this right? Joel Persson, Theodor Lindstrom, he only made it to the AHL. And another guy in this category who made it to the Oilers was Jan Heda in about 2006. And he was actually, when he came, I remember thinking, this is a really good player. But the Oilers quickly jettisoned him, and he had a really good career in Colorado and Columbus. Now, he's a different kind of player, a bigger defensive defenseman who could move the puck a bit than Leppanen is. But nonetheless, he fit the category of a European player who had come over and made it at a later age. So, but there's 9 of them who this century have come over and had either an okay to great NHL career. What caught, the more noticeable ones would be, Dick Tarnstrom. We remember him from the Oilers. Lubomir Sekaras. Some people might remember František Kaberle. Michael Kempny, Heda. The 2 that caught my eye, though, were Marek Zidlichki and Brian Rafalski. Brian Rafalski is an American who played college hockey and then went over there to play pro for about 3 years. So he's included in my list for that reason. They're both really similar to Leppanen, and they were by far the highest scorers. They both played in the same top Finnish league in their final year in Europe. and they both had about a point a game. Zidlicki had 47 points in 54 games, Rafalski 53 points in 53 games. Well, Leppanen apparently set a record, and he had more points than anything. He's at 63 points in 60 games. So he's right there in the scoring. It's a really high amount of point scoring for defensemen in the Finnish league. It's a kind of, that's an all-star total. And he's right there with these two guys. And those guys, both of those guys in their first year in the NHL, they stepped right in and made a big contribution to their teams. Zidlicki had 53 points in 82 games for Nashville, and Rafalski had 32 points in 75 games for New Jersey. So right out of the hop, they were ready to go. We know that Leppanen's offensive talent is probably, based on points, similar to his puck moving. And that's what you read. This guy is an outstanding puck mover. Bruce Kurlock, the Oilers prospects guru. He had lots of good things to say about this guy's agility on his skates, his ability to make plays, see the whole ice, make great passes.
But he can't defend.
So this is what we don't know, Kurt, is right? Where's his defense? Where's it going to be? And, and we don't know about Rafalski or Zidlicki. When they came over, where was their level of defensive play? Were they vastly superior to where Leppanen is? So he's a smaller player. He's about the same size as Rafalski and Zidlicki, although both of those guys are a bit shorter and thicker, I believe. So, maybe maybe they were that much superior defenders. And this guy isn't, for that reason alone, he won't make it. But I found the offensive production, the similarity between, doing it in the same league at the same level as these two other players was really encouraging. There are two definite guys who are from the same general mold, at least, who have made it. And I think there's reasons to hope that this guy could make it.
Well, I can come up with this basic positive. We all know last year that the Bakersfield Condors played hard, but they really lacked skill up and down the lineup, up front and on defense. Having a skilled puck mover like this in the lineup, night in and night out for Bakersfield, will be good for the development of every player that's on that team, and as a result, good for the organization overall. Bringing in these guys who can play the game at a high level, it's the old thing. It'll float every boat in the lake, right? So I like that. I like that they're bringing over talent to play in that team, so that young guys have someone who can get them the puck. Whether or not he'll be able to defend enough to end up in the NHL someday, I guess we'll find out, right? But he certainly comes with high offensive grades in every way that you look at it. So he has some of the skills required. Well, let's just see if he has the entire toolkit.
Yeah, I might have Reijo Ruotsalainen on my brain. So, and again, we don't know if he can play the right side, like if he can move over and play the right side, if that is a possibility in his repertoire. I mean, if he can't, then he's got Nurse, Ekholm, and Kulak ahead of him. That's pretty tough. And, I don't know where the depth chart would fit in after that, but there's lots of, if he can play the right side, then it's more like Stetcher and Emberson who he's competing with, which is much less of a stretch, but I don't know if that's a possibility or not. Mm-hmm. We'll know soon. Kurt, let's move over to the salary cap issue.
Yeah, this was big news today.
I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not an expert on the salary cap.
Nor am I.
And the use of LTIR. We have, I think we had Ira on the podcast last year explaining it to us, and that did help.
Ira's exceptionally good at it.
Ira Cooper is brilliant at it. Yeah. And he was unhappy with the changes that were made for reasons which I cannot articulate properly, so I'm not going to try. But from my perspective, Kurt, essentially what they've done is there's a salary cap in the playoffs, and the same salary cap that you had in the regular season, you have to have in the playoffs. So you can't have a team with $100 million in salary, or let's say $95 million in salary, kind of like Florida did in the Stanley Cup final when the cap is $88 million. You can't ice that team. You'll have to ice a team that fits. This is my understanding. And RF, I'm getting this wrong, you can text me and we'll correct it next podcast. So my understanding is that you've got to be cap compliant essentially in the playoffs. Now, and when a player goes on LTIR, let's say a player earning $5 million a year gets injured in January, he's out the rest of the season.
It goes by average NHL salary.
Yeah,
average cap hit.
You can't bring in a $5 million guy. You can only bring in a guy who has the average cap hit from the previous season to replace him for the rest of the year. You can use that player in the playoffs if the guy with the $5 million cap hit is ruled out for the season. If not, you can't use the player who's brought in. It's my understanding.
Yep.
So it's a lot stickier, and I'm actually entirely grateful about this. I just think it's fantastic from a like not a salary cap expert perspective. I think that there was a massive, not only an incentive, almost an imperative to try to cheat the cap, cheat the system for NHL teams if you wanted to win the cup. Almost every NHL team, I think, save for Colorado in the last 5 or 6 years, has cheated the cap in this way. They had to if they wanted to win. It works. You can get an extra great player or two into your lineup in the playoffs. You're nuts if you weren't working towards that as an NHL GM. So it built in this need to be dishonest, essentially, for NHL. And it's super unhealthy for a system to produce those kind of results. And I'm glad that kind of pressure isn't on any of these guys. You know, although I know like they're all just hardcore about winning. That's all they think about, whatever they say. They weren't losing any sleep over it. I'm also sure about that. Nonetheless, I just think it was terrible. The system they had in the going. So
yeah, I thought it was a crummy system, and I think it's hilarious that the NHL spent so many years insisting it wasn't a problem, and then upended half the CBA to fix something that wasn't broken. Right? Like what a charge that is. It'd be interesting to see Florida, right? Because with Tkachuk starting the year on LTIR, that was the first thing that leapt to my mind. Was, well, I wonder how that's going to work. Right.
I thought, Kurt, they were going to play revolving Ring Around the Rosie or whatever that is. What's that game where you're going on the chairs and you got to sit down? You know, like one player would take a turn on LTIR and then he would get up and start playing again, musical chairs. And then they would, thank you. And then they would have another player sit down on the LTIR chair through the year. So they would just keep rotating who was hurt or actually hurt. But then if they needed to pretend someone was hurt, then they would do that. And they would rotate it through the years to take advantage of it in Florida. I thought that might be the clever scheme. And I'll put it that way. Like, you know, these are, the teams, the NHL was supposedly onto it and starting to investigate the teams and getting tough on this. But as for like admitting that they made a mistake, Gary Bettman does not. Does he strike you, Kurt, as the kind of person who admits that they make mistakes?
I've never heard Gary say he was wrong. And look, I think Mr. Bettman has done a lot of good things for the NHL. But we pretty quickly see him gloss over the stuff that doesn't go so well.
Maybe he's the one who's forced this, and maybe he never liked it in the first place. He probably didn't like it, and now it took a new CBA to actually get rid of it. Is probably the truth.
Yeah, a few other interesting things, right? The no deferred compensation.
Yeah.
Between that and the LTR changes, I really think that the NHL deadline day thing is a thing of the past. I think that's one of the things that this change to the CBA does is it all but erases big deadline day trades, because the deferred compensation thing, the splitting of salaries.
You can only split it in half. You can't split it in half and then half again after that.
You have to wait. I think it's 75 days before you split it again.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I mean, I really think that deadline day is going to be ho hum here on in.
Okay, I'm going to disagree.
Yeah,
Teams still want to win that cup. And they will they will be doing all they can within these new rules to do so. And they just have to move out. They might have to pay higher prices to move out a player.
I believe firmly that these two changes have made it much harder to make deadline deals than it was before.
Well, certainly if you had that super bonus of cap space like Florida did, you certainly open things up for you all of a sudden. We can say that with certainty. And but you
like the Trent Frederic trade going forward, the Oilers couldn't make that trade, right? Because of the salary deferral.
Yeah. It's funny, the Oilers got in heck for like the whole Evander Kane situation, but in the end, they had all these injuries at the end of the year. Ekholm, Draisaitl, like all these players were sitting out, and they didn't need to use that LTIR space, as I understand it. In the end, I don't think they did.
And I keep saying deferred comp. I'm talking about the retention money, of course. So I'm sure I was sitting at home going, "No, Kurt, it's the other thing." Yes, it's the double
deferred
retention
compensation is when you get paid 15 years later. You're still getting $20,000 a year. So
I was just thinking one thing, saying the other. So I'm sorry, Ira. It is the double retention restriction.
I knew what you meant, Kurt.
I'm glad you did.
Just because I don't know what you mean. Just because I'm like you, I don't really know. I'm not.
I know a little bit. I probably know enough to be wrong occasionally, is the truth.
Our dear friend Bruce often spoke with more certainty than I thought was perhaps wise on salary cap issues, and would invariably get an email the next day from Ira. So it happened 3 or 4 times, and I thought, "Oh, here you go again, Bruce. Don't do it. Don't talk about the cap." All right. All right. Now we get to the interesting thing, the McDavid contract. And before we get into what Jeff Jackson said today, I just want to read, just review kind of what was said last week. Let me just find what John Shannon said, because that's the crux of it, actually. Well, there's two. I don't think we had Friedman's comment last week when we talked. Did we even talk about this last week? So McDavid talked about it last week at the Team Canada training camp in Calgary. Maybe we did talk about that.
We did.
Okay, we did. But what we didn't talk about, so I'll just skip ahead to Shannon. The next day after that, John Shannon, who I refer to as an insider, and I don't refer to him as an insider because he breaks trade news or tries to. I refer to him as an insider is in that he's one of the 200 hockey men that Mark Spector has so famously talked about. But Al Strachan also talked about the NHL being a little village of about 400 men. And these guys are all hooked up, the made men of the NHL. They know what's going on. They hear all the rumors. They hear things. John Shannon has been a made man of the NHL for 4 decades now. He's run, he ran the biggest show in Hockey Night in Canada, and he's kept around the game. He's got contacts galore. He knows everybody, and he knows everything. He does not, generally speaking, break news, but I can honestly say, like in listening to John Shannon, which I do on Oilers Now all the time and other shows as well, I've never heard him, let alone fabricate anything. I've never heard him exaggerate. It just isn't his style. So when he said what he said, I took it as someone who's heard something from a credible source, and he's passing it on. He's assessed it. He believes it to be true. He's got the judgment to do that and to put it in to give it the right weight. He didn't rush out on Twitter and put a post out on it. He just mentioned this in his podcast when the McDavid contract came up. And here's what he said, quote, John Shannon, "There are people in Edmonton holding their breath. I think there's people in the Oilers office holding their breath. It's not the new contract. It's not going to be announced in training camp. He's going to go into the regular season without a new contract," unquote. That is a very clear, bold statement, prediction about what's going to happen. And I don't think John Shannon makes that if he hasn't been told by someone that that's what's going to happen. Doesn't mean it's right, but I think it means, but I have no doubt someone said that to John Shannon, who's a credible person who he trusts and knows to get things right. Doesn't mean it's right, maybe that same person who told him it is going to change their story. But that's what he said. And I think, so when I heard that for the first time, really, I got more anxious about this whole thing. And the reason is twofold, Kurt. First of all, Bob Stauffer, who is credible and what he says often comes true, had said there's going to be a bunch of contracts by August 28th. Podkolzin, Ekholm, Knobloch, McDavid. Something has gone haywire on that, and certainly McDavid didn't sign by August 28th. So there was that expectation from a very trustworthy source who very often gets it right, Bob. Like, no one's closer to the Oilers management and knows more about what's going on with the Oilers than Bob Stauffer, other than the people who run the Oilers. So that didn't happen. And then Shannon says this, and it just triggered in me, like, in Edmonton, we've been through these kinds of situations before. And the final thing was, I just didn't understand what was going on with McDavid. What, if he wants to sign here, as he says, he came out and said, he wants to compete for a Stanley Cup in Edmonton. That's his most cherished thing. If he wants that, why doesn't he just sign? Because we know whatever term and salary he wants, he's going to get. What's the holdup? I couldn't figure it out. So that's before we get in today, why don't I get your thoughts on that, the Shannon comment, and just up to that point where you were?
I don't know if I have much of a comment on John Shannon or what he says. As you know, I've at no point have been worried whether or not Connor McDavid was going to sign here.
Correct.
When you texted me about that, I think I said something like much ado about nothing.
You did.
And I've said all along, he'll re-sign, he'll extend before the season starts.
You did.
The question will be term. And I still think that's the question. I think Connor just hasn't decided how long he's going to sign for. And I can understand why he might not have decided that yet. But I personally think that's the case. I thought that's the case all along. And I've by the people I talk to who I trust, I've never been told anything different that I should believe it differently.
So I wavered. I was anxious, but I thought he would sign, but I was starting to think, like, what's going on? It's just my spider senses were tingling, which I think is what I sent to you in a note to maybe Murdoch.
And you've got good spidey senses, so it's smart to listen to them.
Something's going on. But what I think was going on is I just didn't understand McDavid, his thought process. And today, Jeff Jackson went on Oilers Now, talked to Stauffer, and explained for the first time in a way that I grasped McDavid's thought process. And now I'm with you, Kurt. I think he's signing. And it finally makes sense to me why he's doing what he's doing. Now, Jackson made clear that the issue is term. And he also made clear that McDavid is highly aware of the fact that if he tries to break the bank, that it impacts the competitive balance of the team. They're less able to bring in players. So he's thinking about all these things. And then I'm just going to read you what I thought was the key quote from Jackson in terms of explaining
please do.
The mindset of Connor McDavid. He said, it's going to be something, the new contract is going to be something Connor is comfortable with, both in terms of a dollar amount and a term amount. I can't tell you where that is exactly going to be at this point because I don't know. But I do know Connor, and he looks at things from all angles. He's not looking at it purely from I'm going to break the bank and make as much money as I can scenario. He wants to find the razor's edge, where he gets paid for the star player that he is, that allows the team to surround himself with the best players that we possibly can, gives us options to do that beyond next year. So all that comes into his thinking. And it was that moment, that razor's edge. It describes McDavid to me as a player, this guy who is probably the most perfectionist player, conscientious player in terms of drills, fanatical, conscientious. going for it so he can push himself to that razor's edge and execute moves under immense pressure with the threat of physical violence against him, and do so better than any other player. That ability comes from a certain mindset, which is foreign to most people. And I think it's clear he's just applying that same mindset right now, that hard work, digging into every detail, thinking through every eventuality, all probabilities, weighing everything carefully. He is now applying that to his contract. And in that regard, it makes perfect sense. This is going to take some time. You don't get to be the best hockey player without not just 10,000 hours of work, but 20, 30,000 hours of work or whatever it is. And you don't get the best contract without thinking hard, discussing it with all parties, talking to management a lot, batting around all kinds of ideas, digging into it, talking to your teammates, talking to your family, thinking it through, doing that all again, looking at all the variables. Most of us are too lazy to put in that amount of work on even important decisions. But I think he's doing that this time with his contract. And I'm okay with that. I think it's cool. And I think he's going to sign here.
I've read a few comments out there. They haven't even talked about money yet. They haven't even exchanged numbers yet. And my response would be, what's to exchange? Are you really going to negotiate dollars with Connor McDavid if you're the Edmonton Oilers? Yeah. Not a chance. They're just leaving that part of the contract blank. They're just hoping he goes for max number of years, but they'll take. I think the dollar figure is already cut and dry, to be perfectly honest with you. I think this is 100% about term.
What do you think?
And I think it's probably 16.
It was interesting today. Stauffer raised Draisaitl's $14 million a year contract with Bowman, not with Bowman, but with Jackson, and mentioned that he was the highest paid player in the league, and one of the best players in the league. And in my three scenarios, which I've thought are all possibilities, where he gets $14 million a year, $16 million a year, or $18 million a year, one of them is around 14. So I think there's I think it's around 16 would be my guess, because that's kind of the status quo. He's taking a similar amount of the cap as he's taken in the past with that. But you never know. Someone weighing everything very carefully as he's doing, where all that the weighting will come out and how it's gonna play out in the end. I think there's a possibility we'll be surprised and he'll take less than 16 million. But
there's only 3 years of cap certainty, right?
There is. Yeah. 3 years. Let's say 3 years, 14.5 or something like that. Like it's unlikely. And I'm speaking as a self-interested fan right now. Like I know the Oilers cap situation too, and I want them to be able to afford other players so they can win. Winning to me is much more important than it's the only consideration because I'm a fan. So what Connor McDavid pays is a big consideration, obviously, for him, but for me as the fan, not so much. So I would like to see the lower number, but I won't bat it. I'll be happy with whatever he signs for. I would like to see a term of at least 3 years. I'm hoping to see that. So,
are you on Instagram, Dave?
No, I did. Is this true? What this Lauren?
I do follow Lauren Kyle McDavid on Instagram.
Of course,
and and she and Leon Draisaitl's wife got matching rings. And what she wrote on her post was, "Friends don't copy, they match."
Boom.
Now, you know me, I don't usually bring up that kind of stuff, but I thought that was more than a little bit intriguing.
I think she's a great character. I love her entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
And
what a great addition to the city of Edmonton.
Yeah, she's been very businesslike. And I mean,
agree.
I haven't been to the restaurant. I feel like it's not for the likes of the like me. It's for fancy
the grubby scribe.
Yeah,
as we've been called.
Stain, wrench, Wretch. Ink stain wretch.
Stained wrench.
Not for us, Kurt. But so I don't know. And I hope that doesn't actually, a lot of people don't think, because Edmonton's kind of a blue collar city. A lot of people might be thinking, I just can't go there because, and then they won't go to a restaurant. But
I don't think there's any shortage of cash in Edmonton.
That's true. And there's lots of people who would like that kind of thing for sure. Anyway, yeah, she's a character. That's really funny. That's really interesting. So we'll see. We'll see, Kurt. That's what I've been hoping for is I would be like, that would shock me if it was 8/14, but the 14 wouldn't shock me.
No, it wouldn't shock me either.
It's similar to what Crosby did on his third contract in Pittsburgh. Malkin was paid more, but Crosby took the same amount as he had been getting, I think, $8.7 million a year cap hit, if I'm not mistaken. And he took considerably less than he could have got. Now, some people say when the argument is he signed that when he had bad concussion issues, so it was a risk for Pittsburgh as well, which is probably true. But you can see McDavid, like if it was 4 years or 3 years of that amount, 14, he can, if he decides money's a bigger issue down the road, he can certainly go for it.
If the cap goes up, he'll make that money back.
The problem is, Kurt, if he in these next few years, if he does, let's go 17 or 18, it's a big problem for the Oilers in terms of the cap. And it's, as you've said, it's not his fault. He should get what he's worth. Yep. I accept that. Barely. But
fix the other problems.
Fix the other problems. Sometimes you can't. Like you've previous management or whatever, you're stuck with contracts, you're stuck with buyouts. You're haunted by past failures and
as you know, I like to say there's always another way to skin a cat.
Yeah. Well, maybe you're right. And creative management teams do that now and then, don't they? They figure it out. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's a good place to end the podcast with that stunning anecdote from Instagram. I better get on you. I do have an Instagram
breaking
account.
News.
I do have and I saw that on Twitter, which is where I'm at, where all the cantankerous people are. But maybe all the nice people are on Instagram. No,
there's lots of nice people on Twitter.
There you go. There are indeed. Final thoughts, Kurt? Anything you'd like to add?
Other than it was nice to see all the boys on the ice at the community arena the other day. And here's a happy thought for you. We are in a month where we will see Oilers hockey.
Wow. It's fast. It's coming back fast. That was a quick summer. And those guys were out gallivanting in Europe. Probably really good for them. I remember when the Oilers, like in the Stanley Cup days, like in the summer, Glenn Anderson would just go fly off to Thailand for 2 months and then be back good to go.
Why not? Get away, clear your head, right? Whatever it takes.
I think so.
Yeah.
Kurt, thanks for talking tonight.
It's been a pleasure.
And in the meantime, and in between time, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.